Today, guys, we're going to talk about why obsessing over stereo width in a mix is a waste of time. Hey guys, Robert McClellan here, and you're watching the Home Studio Simplified channel. This channel exists to simplify the complexities of the home studio and to help you make professional sounding music in a less than professional space. Alright guys, so before we go any further, if you like this kind of content that revolves around recording, mixing, mastering, and pretty much anything audio related, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and while you're at it, click the bell icon as well. That way, every time I upload a new video, you'll be the first to know. I also go live every Saturday for Sound Advice Saturday, where I take a Q&A type session with individuals just like yourself. Alright, so I realize I've made a really bold statement right in the offset of this video, and before you start crucifying me in the comment section down below, let me clarify what I've just said. Obsessing over stereo width is a waste of time because most listeners will never even hear it. Have you ever walked into a typical living room and the left and right speakers are in often different rooms entirely? That's effectively listening to that source in mono. Now, step back several feet from any set of speakers, you're effectively listening in mono again. And even in the car, you're setting closer to one speaker than you are to the other, and that's pretty much mono. So yes, on headphones, stereo width does matter until someone gives one of their earbuds to a friend. I think I've made my point. So this is one of the many reasons, as you've probably already heard if you've been around this channel for any length of time, that I'm not a big fan of stereo imaging or widening plugins. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't focus on your stereo image at all. In fact, what I am saying is just don't let your desire for out-of-this-world width drive your decisions when it comes to mixing. So here's the truth. Many of these plugins that are labeled stereo widening plugins are actually using phase shift to create that width sound that you hear. And that effect does sound great in stereo, but horrible when summed to mono, or even when your mix is played on speakers that are kind of too close together. I certainly don't recommend using these plugins across your whole mix. However, I do admit that they can be nice on individual tracks, but often create more problems than they solve. So just a quick tip when using a stereo widening plugin is to check your mix in mono and make sure that your tracks don't disappear or certain frequencies aren't being buried. Usually it's the bass or the vocals that are the first to go. So how does one actually achieve true stereo width then? That wide sound that a Pro Mix has where it literally sounds like it's leaping from the edges of the speakers. Well, it's actually a combination of a lot of things, and that's why the one knob wonders, those widening plugins, often fail. You see, it actually has to do with things that don't even require a plugin sometimes, like arrangement and panning, EQ, compression, reverb, delay, mid-side processing, and of course other intentional moves like double tracking a guitar. So instead of sitting here and talking about it all day, let me actually show you some audio examples of exactly what these widening plugins are doing to the tracks that you're using them on. Let's hop on over to the screen. Alright, so in this example here, I've got the exact same guitar track duplicated into this channel below. And as you can see, I have them labeled phase shift top and phase shift bottom. Now, the way to test whether these are in fact actually completely identical is to actually invert the phase of one channel. This should, if they are completely identical, cancel each other out, and that's called phase cancellation. So let's take a listen. As you can see, when I flipped the phase or inverted the phase on one of these channels, it completely took away all noise whatsoever. All of the peaks and the troughs from that waveform are combating each other so much that they're canceling one another out. I'll bring it back in now. So as we can see from the experiment that we just did, widening plugins are not flipping phase, but rather they are shifting phase. Let me show you what I mean. If I was to zoom into this and move this bottom waveform, which is, as we just seen, the exact identical representation of the one above it, and just shift it ahead 14 samples, now when I go to zoom back out, this is going to sound much different. So now if we flip the phase on one of these channels, they will no longer be canceled out because they're not actually perfectly aligned like they were before. But it also gives us a good representation of what something sounds like that's out of phase, that honky, nasally sound where a lot of the low end is drained from it. We'll put the phase back in now. So the stereo widening plugin doesn't stop here. It actually does some panning of these two mono sources that it's created now. So let's pan these based off of maybe some moderate settings that might be on that widening plugin. Like, let's say 60 right, 60 left, or somewhere around there. Now take a listen. So now, even by inverting the phase, that honkiness tends to go away, but at the same time, it sounds a little wider. So this is where the trickery comes in, because it sounds good in the headphones and it sounds like a stereo source. In fact, we've even seen on our volume meters that it's going to the left and the right channels, so everything's great, right? No. In fact, if we were to go to the bus where both of these tracks are being sent to, we could simply fold that down to mono and hear a true representation of exactly what this is doing to the audio. All right, so as we have just seen and heard in this kind of over-the-top example, now not all of them are going to be shifting by 14 samples, but it's the premise of the matter that I'm trying to get across, and that is that any amount of phase shifting of the same signal is going to create some artifacts, and that's the thing that we're trying to get rid of, especially in home studios. So this is one of the reasons why I'm continually telling people not to use stereo widening plugins across an entire mix. Now, this is just one source that I've done this to. Could you imagine if it was an entire mix that was duplicated and phase shifted? All right, so now we're going to listen to what a stereo imaging plugin will do to an entire mix. Please bear with me, as this is an old song that I wrote, recorded, and mastered here in my home studio. And because it's older, I have a little bit of a cringe factor. Just bear with me. Okay, so that's no imaging plugin whatsoever. Now let's turn on our stereo imaging plugin. This is a stock stereo imager that comes with Cakewalk by BandLab. And what we're going to do is we're going to enable it and bypass it just so you can hear the difference. We'll start out with it being enabled. Now it's bypassed. You know it. Okay, so one of the things that I want you to really listen for is the bass frequencies. I've got it in bypass now. I'm going to enable it whenever the bass kicks in, and I want you to really listen to the bass frequencies. So as you could hear, I'm sure you could, especially if you had headphones on, that the bass frequencies just kind of went away. You still heard sort of the pluck and the attack of the bass, but the low end just almost disappeared entirely. So, did it sound wider? Yes, but I lost so much clarity. Okay, so one more thing to just completely drive this point home. Let's use some visual aids to show us exactly what it's doing to this mix whenever I enable the stereo imaging. So, as of now, it's bypassed. If you look on this meter here, this yellow bar at the top is showing our correlation, or in other words, how in phase our mix is. Now, this is going to vary. It's going to bounce back and forth, and that's fine as long as it stays above this 0. When it begins to drop below that 0, that means that there are phase cancellation problems that are occurring. This little meter up here is called a goianometer, and what that's doing is showing our stereo field. So I want you to take a look at the before and after. Once again, this will be bypassed when we start. All right, so what we were able to ascertain from that is that yes, it did get wider, but that's only because it was phase shifted to the left and to the right. And we know that because the correlation meter began to drop below that 0, which means there was phase cancellation problems. Now, what does all that equate to in the real world? Well, in the real world, if I am in the car or I am listening on one earbud that a friend let me borrow, I'm essentially losing a ton of frequencies now because they're not in phase anymore. So let's go back to the mix and let's see what this is going to do if we fold that down to mono after this stereo imaging has been applied. So we'll start it out bypassed once again.
You know it hurt to see you go, and I watched you slip away. It happened so slow, though there are things we can't explain. I know one who can.
Okay, so that's folded down to mono right there. Now we can still hear the bass frequencies. The vocal got louder, but we can still hear a majority of the instruments and they sound natural. Now when we enable this plugin, let's see how that changes.
'Cause you still have this hope. The hands that are holding you will never let you go. You'd be better off than you've ever been if you just come back home again.
So as I'm sure you were able to hear, as soon as I enabled the plugin in mono, the vocal dropped, the bass went away, it sounded muddy, and a lot of the instruments began to sound much like that honky sound that we heard a minute ago when I phase shifted the two mono tracks. So yet again, this is why I'm not a big fan of widening plugins. Now I hope that you understand, you have seen, you have heard exactly what they're doing to your mixes. Now, like I said, they do have their place in audio, otherwise they would not create them. If you place it on a mono track and you use it sparingly, it can thicken things up at times. Just don't go crazy with them. Okay, and now for our last example, let's listen to what true stereo width does sound like. Now, this is not even utilizing any plugins, any EQ, or any of the other things that we could actually use to push it even farther outside the boundaries of the speakers. However, what this is simply a double-tracked acoustic guitar, panned left and right. Let's listen to the huge difference that's made here, and let's also fold it down to mono to see exactly what that sounds like. So essentially you would hear this in beautiful stereo, and if it happened to have been folded down to mono, or you were unfortunately just given one earbud by a friend, you would still hear those guitars come through pretty much just the exact same way that they were recorded. If this has been helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. If you liked it, go ahead and leave a comment below and let me know that you did. If you have anything that you'd like to add to this, leave that in the comment section down below. If you have some ways that you could completely shoot my theories down, leave that in the comment section below too. I love getting in conversations with individuals in the comments. So until next time, guys, I'll see you later.